Well, thank you for having me. Before I start, I want to thank my my daughter Martha, and Tom, and the other folks that helped me get through the computer stuff. I want to thank Bill for his photography from the last storm, and of course, I want to thank Bob Patrone. Not all of you realize the volume of videography he has done for this area, and particularly over this past few months, the storms, the storm damage, the changes in the breachways, and so forth. Bob has made it available, and believe me, people in high places have got Bob's work to see visually really what's going on down here. So Bob, thanks. Okay, can I have the next one? Okay. Just for some background, for those who may or may not know, what we call really how the beaches are established. The energy of the ocean waves really dictate what the beach is going to look like. Low energy waves carry the sand into suspension and deposit it on the beach. This occurs when we have low energy waves, and typically it's in the spring and the summertime, what we call a summer beach. It is typically a wider beach and not particularly steep. The newly deposited sand, of course, piles up, and that's what we call the berm, and that's where you put your towel and so forth. High energy waves occur primarily in the wintertime, but also various storms. What this does is it works against the beach formation. It erodes the sand, cuts it back, and this usually results in a very steep and narrow beach. This is critical as we see, actually, as you've witnessed the last few days, how these things are changing. So the winter beach is really when you get the worst part. There's no berm, no buffer, so you get more erosion in that period of time. Due to our coastal orientation, can I have the next one? We have a thing called longshore drift, and essentially it's because our coastline is oriented east and west, and because of the Earth's rotation and so forth, we have a net movement of sand from west to east. So it's building up and moving down this way. That being said, one of the real quirks that we have experienced in the last winter was almost a reversal of that longshore drift. So where we were piling up on the west side and sand-starved on the east side, that's why we have the problems that we're having both in Quonochontaug Breachway and Charlestown Breachway. So we'll see how this plays out. But as long as this, geological time, this has been going on, and how the sand is moving back and forth. Seawalls, when they're constructed, they were really constructed in places like New Jersey and so forth. And the idea was to kind of trap that longshore drift and collect the sand. Well, what it did in the short term is it collected the sand on one side, and on the back side, it was sand-starved. So you'd have all these groins that were out there, and then when it ended, severe beach erosion. And that's somewhat of what's happening at the end of Surfside Drive, where that wall ends, and the seawater and the sand is deflected away from that area. So that's one of the reasons why we have such a problem over there. So the seawalls are, it was a good idea, I think, when people thought they were, but it turns out to be a very not wise thing to do. In fact, one of the issues that we're going to be dealing with the breachways, particularly Charleston Breachway, is a lot of the regulations do not allow for hardened structures anymore. And what we're going to have to do is to rebuild some of those seawalls. So that's going to be a stumbling block in our permitting for restoration of some of these areas. Okay, next one. Okay, once the sand is on the beach, of course, it dries out and the wind takes over. So you have the wave action, and now you have the wind action, and the fine sand is blown all over the place. Well, fortunately, vegetation seems to take care of that, Mother Nature. So primarily, the most important one of our pieces of vegetation is our American beach grass. Not only does it catch the wind-blown sand, but it also has a root system we call rhizomes, and it's essentially a network of one plant connected to another, and it forms a net which actually holds the sand in place and holds the dune in place. It really works to create the dune. And to enhance the collection of the wind-blown sand, we use snow fence. We call it dune fence now. It's a lot more appropriate terminology. And that seemed to work very, very well as well. In some of our back dune areas that are more stabilized, we've gone from the grasses to shrubs, and we also planted Japanese black pines in there, which also does the same thing. We get in the American beach grass that catches the sand at this level, and the shrubs that catch the sand at this level, the Japanese pines that collect it at a higher level. I remember years ago, before we planted the Japanese black pines, we'd have to plow out the parking lot every year because the wind-blown sand would just fill it right up in there. All these plants are adapted for living in these conditions, primarily almost like, hi, Bill.
I can hear you.
Good. As if you have trouble hearing me. So this is the plants are adapted for this. Okay, next one, please. This is kind of where it all started. Next one. This is the winter of 1977. 1976, we had a near-miss hurricane, which created a winter beach condition in the late summer, early fall. This is so much, listening to Bill's talk the other night, this is deja vu. What happened in 1912, this is kind of what happened in 1977. The beach was completely eroded, scoured out, and moved back significantly. This is a couple of shots right at the water's edge. This is our dune in the East Beach Association. It's fallen in. Next one, please. There's my daughter, who was about 3 feet tall at the time, standing at the edge of the parking lot, East Beach parking lot. And there's another shot of that absolute cliff that dropped down in there. Okay, next one. This is my old truck parked at the parking lot. The parking lot was bisected. We lost about a third of the parking lot on the ocean side. And then this is another shot of the drop. And you can see kind of over at the blue shutters, and that area is also very badly eroded. This is about 7 or 8 feet here. Over by where the bike racks and so forth are at East Beach, that was at the end of Highland Road. That dropped down 12 feet. That was just chopped right across. Next one. Over in here, I don't know how many of you remember the Trammels had a little fishing shack on the beach. Well, that's what's left of it. It went right in. It's just amazing how a series of these nor'east storms just pounded and pounded for days and days and days, and that's what took out the beach. Next one. Well, here's where it gets dicey. The powers that be of the East Beach Association decided the best way to protect the shoreline was to put in rock walls. And they ordered a construction company to come down and put this rock wall all along the East Beach parking lot. Well, I was relatively young, fresh out of graduate school. I knew a little bit, didn't have a whole lot of confidence. But I set up a meeting between the Coastal Resource Management Council and the president, vice president of East Beach Association. They had a lively conversation. They both told each other where they could go. And the Coastal Resource Management Council extended to them a $1,000 a day fine to get rid of the damn rocks. So at this point, with my knees knocking, I went back to my office and drew up a restoration plan, which was passed by the Coastal Resource Management Council, and we began work. Over that period of time, the administration of the East Beach Association had changed, and people were gung-ho, let's get the beach fixed back up, and so we got the go-ahead to move. At the same time, okay, next. Okay, these are more pictures of the rocks. I can flip right through the next one. Okay, this is Central Beach, and basically they had the same situation. At that point in time, the Central Beach, the seawall at Central Beach extended from all the way down Surfside, down to their property, East Beach Association, Central Beach property line. And of course it all washed in and so forth. Well, my old friend Pete Skipper and Stu Pomeroy, I don't know how many of you remember them. Pete was a Dutchman, he was an engineer, he understood about dikes and so forth. He convinced the Central Beach folks to remove all this and again join in what I was doing to restore the beaches with fencing and vegetation, and we're still working together on a lot of this kind of stuff. As I said, the seawalls themselves, the shoreline is moving. It's constantly moving, and of course the seawalls don't move with the rest of it. So there's a flexibility in the barrier beaches to, maintain an equilibrium with sea level change and so forth. And the rocks just don't move. But what's happened, and I've seen it happen twice, is those walls collapse. The water gets in back of them, and the whole thing collapses down. So the grass and the dune building seems to be working so far. Of course, we're compromised all the time with changes in our shoreline and changes in our sea level, but we're staying ahead of it. Yes, Leo?
I'd like to say one other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong. I've read that agreement with CRMC, and doesn't it say in there that Art Ganz will supervise the restoration of the lot and will continue to be the principal in maintaining the beach in this area?
That was when I was young and skinny.
It's written in the CRMC decision.
Yeah.
I've read that document as well, and I see no reference to a time limitation.
And let me tell you, being the old goat that I am, we got into a little bit of trouble not getting a permit for our latest bunches of dune fencing. And I pulled out that document and I brought it down to these kids who weren't even born when that document was done. So there it is. Okay, next one. Okay, these again more shots of the damage done in 1977. Next one, please. Okay, we started restoring the beach with fence and planting beach grass. Sandy, how many yards of beach grass have you planted? Many? A few. So many of the volunteers. There were a lot of people who thought I was nuts. Absolutely. But we had some good volunteers. We planted the grass. And then eventually, the thing to do at that point was to plant the Japanese black pines. Now, Japanese black pines are not native to this area, but they are sufficiently adapted to living in the arid conditions. And again, with a root system. And so they've really done the trick. In fact, a lot of the vegetation that we have in our more or less stabilized dune system are, according to the experts, invasives. But I maintain that poison ivy keeps people off the dunes. Okay, and this is progress. This is 1986, and you can see how we're starting to grow the beach and building the dunes. And yes, every Christmas, after everybody gets through with their Christmas trees, I go along, pick them up, and put them where there's a hole in the fence or someplace that we can use. Traditional Dune stuff was to plant Christmas trees and old Christmas trees and stuff, which will eventually catch the windblown sand. So there's some of that, and that's 1986. Next. And again, you can see the Japanese. When we planted those Japanese black pine, they looked like little bottle brushes. So they've grown quite a bit in those few years. You can see the parking lot on the backside now, and we are starting to build up that dune. And the way we've been doing it, I tried a couple of different ways. I used to put the fence right there at the toe of slope, but with the prevailing south wind and east wind and so forth, it didn't always catch. So I used to put in laterals every so many feet, and that caught the wind-blown sand much better. Today what we're doing is a zigzag formation, does the same thing, catches the various wind directions on there. Okay, next. Okay, this is looking toward the East Beach boardwalk from the Central Beach boundary line. Again, a second or third generation. I've lost track of how many layers of fence we put in there. And all this fencing was done with volunteers, too. We only started hiring people to do this a couple of years ago, but we just got a whole bunch of folks together. And in fact, Bob Schoenberger, one of the members of East Beach Association, ran a machine shop, and he created this rig to pound the posts down into the sand. So we passed that thing around to do that. You'll notice they were all metal posts in those days. We got away and started using pressure treated. Lasts a bit longer. Okay, next. A similar shot from Central Beach. This gives you a little bit more of a graphic of the effect of the seawalls looking across from there. And then this is at the end of Surfside. And you can see how it kind of digs in. And it still wants to dig in because it bounces off those walls. And as I said, in a severe set of cases, the water would get underneath the wall and the wall will collapse. It's collapsed twice in my adulthood. Okay, next. And this is, again, working on reconstruction. You can start to see the snow fence that they're starting to put up there at Central Beach. And again, this is right at that critical point where the wall ends at Central Beach, between there and their boardwalk. Next. And now we have this past winter. I can't emphasize enough the deja vu after Bill's talk about 1912, because that's exactly what happened again. These things, these stumps are just enormous, many hundreds of pounds. They were just washed in. That one was on ended up on the East Beach boardwalk. You'll see in Bob's video later on several of those things over at Central Beach that darn near went right up to Surfside Drive. So the thing that makes this storm more interesting to me is, okay, we had the damage, but what we had was a deposition of sand, probably in some places a foot or more, that came up rather than cutting the beach. And why East Beach was spared this way, I do not know. But this is layers and layers of sand that went on top of the beach. And of course, the logs were everywhere, and they really, destroyed our fences. Next one. Here's another one of Bill's pictures. It's quite a sad thing when you get up in the morning and take a look at this thing. And because I used to walk the beach a lot, and day-to-day changes. But you can actually see some of the remnants of my fences from past generations that were unearthed as well. Next one. Okay, again, this is all the December storm. This is the one that got the thing going. And you can see the chunks of beach grass. To give you a good example is that clump over on your left shows you the root system of the beach grass. which is what's holding these dunes together. Okay, next one. Again, another shot. We have several of these that Bill took. I couldn't pick out one or two, so I threw them all in. Okay, next one, please. Okay, this is Central Beach, and again, that spot that I keep talking about, there it is at the end, and then everything is just undermined, and the rock wall is kind of collapsed in that area. And you can see the exposed rocks. The sand is just washed right away. Next one, please. Okay, this is a close-up of Surfside Drive, looking down from a friend's yard. I actually took a picture there during the storm, and I got absolutely drenched as it came right up onto their lawn. Next one, please. Okay, you can see the loss there. There's the stairs going to nowhere. Again, after that, at Central Beach. Okay, these are looking at the Nuns Beach. And if you look down towards the Nuns' house, there's a squared-off cement wall. And you can see there's a black top, and then below it is clear. That is all lost sand. And again, over at this end of the beach, it chopped, like we did in 1977. And this is the Atwood's house over in here, and again, chopped back. In the video, Peter Mogilnicki will show you some of the huge rocks that were moved by the storm. Okay, next one. And this is another one. This again is East Beach. More damage, but you can really kind of get an appreciation of how much sand was pushed up. And I was wondering if that's the beach grass would be able to recolonize. I was getting ready to think about ordering some more beach grass, but surprise, surprise, nature has its way. Go ahead. Okay, this is another one taken. Again, I mean, it's a pretty sad sight. But again, we didn't chop the beach this time. It just got pushed right up. Next one, please. This is again over at Central Beach area. Again, right at the end of, when I say this is the end of Ninigret Avenue, where that cut back. Next one, please. Okay, another one of these. Like I said, Bill took so many good pictures, I couldn't choose. But you can see where the fence posts were just snapped right off, too. Next one, please. Is that the last one?
This is the last one.
Oh, there it is. All right, so I took a little walk. And this is July. I was curious as to whether the grass would come back. Well, the grass came back, gangbusters. And we're back in business. In April, we hired a company come in to replace all the dune fencing, and Central Beach jumped right in too. So there's one contiguous dune line running through that was all professionally done. And again, and that zigzag idea to catch the wind-blown sand. So this is where the beach is, but as Pam mentioned to me, it's not quite as wide now as it was in July. So we're still not out of the woods. I hope we don't get any more storms because we're losing our berm. And that's what I have for this. So if you want some questions, or would you rather do Bob's video?
We're going to show the video.
All right, do the video.
You want to set up?
Okay, well, what Bob and Steve and Peter Mogilnicki and Bill wanted to do was to have a narrative back and forth of East Beach, Central Beach, and West Beach. And so this video Bob took in, was it May? May. Just walking and talking. And yeah, I suppose we ought to start from here because this is the present. Right in this spot, in January of 1977, this point dropped down 12 feet. We lost our entire beach. It went right down straight, took out half the parking lot, and this was just a complete drop-off, 12 feet down there and 9 feet in there. Halfway down the little lane there was a fishing shack that, of course, also went into the ocean. So this is where we are today. So I think that we've made some major motions in the right direction supporting this beach. You know, I wanted to get down and cut some of these dead trees out before the poison ivy season.
Oh,
I guess
gosh.
we'll have to wait and let it
Yeah.
go. This has come back very nicely. Of course, we were away the month of April, so this is all new growth.
Fantastic.
This is real new growth. This is in the last couple of days.
That's amazing. Well, I remember during the December and January storms, the water was coming in up. I mean, it put all this sand, a lot of this sand there.
Yeah. Well,
And,
if you watch
there
that
was-
great big huge stump.
Oh gosh, yeah, I have a picture of that.
There's two stumps over at Central Beach that big, almost at the road.
Oh, I saw those.
Yeah. Well, I am very pleased with what I'm seeing here. This is all new growth.
That's amazing.
New beach. Summer beach.
So you told me a story, and I don't know if you touched on it when you were talking to Steve and Peter, but about the winter nor'easter of 1977.
Yeah.
Before that storm, and I know you've told me this before, but I think it would be useful to touch base. What did the beach look like before? Were there dunes before that storm? Was there dune fencing?
No, there was no dune fencing. There was dunes,
Okay.
but nothing like this. Nothing like this. Hurricane Carol flattened it, and it built up a little bit. But this is all serious effort to build this. In fact, the coastal geologist says my dunes are too high.
Oh,
I'll
Is that
take that
possible?
I'll take that as a compliment.
so 77 comes. It's a huge nor'easter.
Yep.
Lasts a couple of days
Yeah. Yeah.
and pounds the beach. And you told me that there was a dramatic drop off.
Two houses off Charleston Beach Road went into the ocean.
Oh my goodness.
There was the Trammell family owned a little fishing shack. It was right there. Of course,
Okay.
that washed in.
Goodness.
And so the whole thing, and basically the dune was bisected. And of course, it wasn't this high. And then, of course, it went down to the parking lot and split the parking lot in half.
And it was a pretty dramatic drop. You showed me
9
a
feet.
picture
Well,
of
this
your
Martha,
daughter.
Martha, this high. So it's 9 feet. And then over here where the flagpole is, that was down 12 feet.
Oh my goodness.
So we have
So just an abrupt drop.
absolutely a drop, a cliff.
So then
Absolutely a cliff.
what happened after that?
After that, and a knee-jerk reaction, two people that were in high places made a decision to dump rocks off the end of the parking lot.
And when you say rocks, do you mean
Yeah,
big boulders like
Boulders.
they have down at Central Beach?
boulders. Yep.
Boulders, okay.
Yep. And I said, wait a minute, you can't do this. Now, you got to remember, I graduated from graduate school in 73. This is 77. I was still pretty green, but I knew that rock walls and beaches don't coexist. So I set up a meeting between the Coastal Resource Management Council and these two individuals from East Beach Association. And they both told each other to go.
So a real Rhode Island meeting.
the Coastal Resource Management Council graciously gave the East Beach Association a $1,000 a day fine until those rocks were removed. Well, at this point, a not so short, fat biologist wrote a restoration plan, which is what's in place today.
When you say
Coastal-
dumped rocks, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm
They
curious about this.
literally- they took
how
dump
far?
trucks, all that exposed area of the parking lot.
So
They just,
how many yards would you say?
oh boy, I'm hard to describe that. But many dump truck loads. I mean, basically, they went to the edge of the parking lot and dumped them.
My
This-
goodness.
this
Must have been
pictures.
tons.
Oh yeah, there was. So they needed to remove that. So they approved, Coastal Resources approved my restoration plan.
Okay.
By this time, Gene Zabel was the president. And
Okay.
Gene was just totally upset by this whole thing. Anyway, let's go to work. So they removed the rocks. A lot of the rocks are in some people's yard that wanted rocks. There are some of them that are down by the edge of the parking lot.
Okay, sure, I know those.
You
Yep.
know, some of those.
Yep.
And we started with the snow fence, or the dune fencing.
And approximately, I know you told me what, there are 6, 7, 8 layers of dune fencing?
Yeah, I've kind of lost track, but
You can see, so there's the new one.
you can visualize. That's probably 6, 7 years ago,
Okay.
and all that before that. So yeah, one on top of another.
And so the line you said of the erosion was about at the flagpole.
Yeah, yep.
And so then where approximately from the flagpole is that first layer of dune fencing, would you say?
Probably where the split rail fence is.
Wow. So that's all new beach.
This is all beach since 1977.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what we do. We trap the wind-blown sand, and we let the beach grass hold the sand in place. And some of the shrubs that are in here, they also act to hold the sand in place. We planted the Japanese black pines. They are not natural. A lot of the experts say that was the wrong thing to do, but they've done a good job of holding the sand.
Yeah. The
And-
logs that had washed into the ocean elsewhere were being pushed up, knocked over a lot of the fence. But nowhere did we see dramatic erosion. We saw, I think, what did you say? It's overwash. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics of overwash and how that's desirable versus what happened elsewhere along the Quonochontaug Neck?
We are an oddity that we had overwash here. Everything else down there was pure erosion, chopped down many feet. Bob's got it all on film as how far down that erosion was. Now, this has come back miraculously.
Yeah, there's a big berm already, which is really remarkable.
Really, really remarkable. Central Beach is looking real good.
Oh, are they? Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's looking real good. Now down further to the west, boy, there's no sand down there.
There was such a dramatic, I haven't been down there in a while, but the couple of days after the storm, we walked to the beach. There was such a dramatic drop off
Yeah.
that people must have lost 10, 15, 20 feet of frontage.
Yep.
And all those houses and cottages are a little closer to the water's edge than
They
they
are,
were.
and those walls, people are not aware of it, but a lot of the water washed out the back of those walls.
Oh, really?
And I have seen, I think it was 1986, that there was enough backwash that those walls collapsed.
Oh, my goodness.
How the beaches are formed. Essentially, thousands of years ago, the glaciers retreated, and they retreated up to essentially Route 1. We call that the Charlestown Moraine.
Yep.
There were several remnants of that. They're called headlands. That's the Quonochontaug headland.
Okay.
So that is the remains of the glacial deposits.
Okay.
There's one at Weekapaug, and there's one at Charlestown Beach.
Gotcha. Okay.
All around here was water. In the summertime, in the springtime, with low energy waves, we get a deposit of sand.
Okay.
Gentle waves deposit the sand, build a berm. In the wintertime, high energy waves tend to erode the beach. So the beach is moving from a steep, narrow winter beach to a broad summer beach.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that, because of our orientation along the shoreline going east and west, due to the Earth's rotation, we have what they call longshore drift. So there is an offshore current that goes from west to east. So the sand is essentially moving. I mean, we're talking thousands of years now.
Sure.
Moving. Now, they started to catch off the ends of these headlands, and the sand was deposited, and they became a sandbar.
Okay.
And then again, thousands of years, that sandbar became what we call a barrier beach.
Okay.
And it essentially sealed our coastal ponds off from the ocean.
I see. Okay.
And they are called coastal lagoons.
Gotcha.
Now in Rhode Island, they are completely enclosed.
Okay.
Now, when you put the rocks out there, whether it's the Beachway rocks or these kind of rocks, it interrupts that flow of sand.
I see.
And technically, on the west side of the Beachway seawalls,
Yep.
builds up and
Oh,
built
sure.
up the sand
Yep.
to the point that it's saturated, and that sand is now migrating and gets sucked into the pond on the incoming tide.
Which is why they've
Or
got
a
to deal
storm
with
time.
with
So-
dredging the
And
breach.
what we have is essentially a tidal delta inside each one of the ponds. So that
Fascinating.
process of longshore drift has been interrupted, which shows the rocks out here.
Gotcha.
Now, after the 38 hurricane, Mr. Thorpe wanted to protect his central beach area with those rocks. And those rocks extended all the way to the East Beach property line.
Did they really?
And when I was doing this, Pete Skipper, who's a dear old friend, departed, and Stu Pomeroy from Central Beach. Pete was a Dutchman, and he was an engineer. He knew and understood dikes.
Sure.
And he said, these rocks have got to go. So he convinced Central Beach to move, to take away all the rocks in front of their parking lot.
Wow.
So that, and the other thing down there is too, they don't have the offshore sand resource that we
Right.
have here. We do have an offshore sand resource. This sand, when it erodes, goes off about 1,500 feet.
Okay, and you can
And
see
so,
that
so when
sandbar.
it comes back. It comes back.
We saw that our first winter here 3 years ago
Yeah.
when we moved. We would walk the beach every day with the dogs, and you could see the sandbar not very far
Yep.
offshore.
Yep.
And then that sand gets pushed back during the spring and
We're
summer.
doing, yep. You can, this has come back quite a bit.
It has.
Yep.
It's really come back. It's amazing. Just a few days makes a big difference. And moves
And
a
the
lot
wind
of
direction.
sand. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, why don't we start? I thought this might be a good place to
Well, it's a good,
do
yeah.
a little talk about Central Beach and the erosion from the winter and
Yep.
what's going on.
Yeah, well, here we are located at Central Beach. My kids call this Little Beach. And you can see how it is kind of receded quite a ways over the period of time. Dunes still look in good shape, believe it or not, but of course pretty much the berm has been pretty much ruined by the storm, but it's starting to build now. Again, we're starting to develop what we would call a summer beach condition, where the low velocity waves are depositing sand on the beach, as opposed to the winter conditions when the heavy energy waves tear away the sand. So it's depositing nicely, so there's a bit of a berm coming back now. You can certainly see, though, the effect of the seawall over there, how that has just caused an erosion. And of course, what it does is the storm water is deflected by those walls, and it actually acts to eddy and carry the sand out from these areas. That's why we have this kind of big arching contour of the
It just
beach.
scours it right out.
Just scours it right out.
And is that what happens?
That's basically what's
here?
happened here.
Yeah.
There's a lot that went on in these winter storms this year that was very much unusual. Now, typically, the longshore drift carries the sand from west to east, and on the west side of the breachway, you would expect to have more sand build up. In this case, these storms, it eroded back, and so that's what you're seeing here, is basically that same effect. Whatever the wind direction was and the conditions were, it caused this scouring out. Now, I'm optimistic, seeing the beach grass coming back, that this dune will will hold up and be in good shape. But
It must have been really something this winter to have these 1,000-pound pieces of wood, come this high, and you can see them all
the way
along here.
Yep.
And is it better to just leave that stuff? Does it help the dunes? Or?
Essentially, to be very optimistic, it'll bury eventually with the movement of sand. Now, this got a long ways to go over here, but some of those up in there probably will bury.
Yep.
But it was a wicked storm. I was down 2 doors down just to see what the contour was like over in there.
Right.
And I was standing about here, and I got dumped.
Wet. Wow.
Got dumped. So it went right up these front steps. You can see there's a lot of repair work that's being done here to try to save the rock wall. Well, a lot of these logs wash down the rivers in Connecticut, end up in the Sound, and they wash up in these storms. Now, when I'm out on my boat, I always have the Coast Guard station channel on, channel 16, and there's always a report of some sort of logs in the water someplace. So when you have a storm like this, they go from there to there.
And this huge stump weighs
God
500
knows.
or 600 or 700 pounds.
Oh, more than that.
And
I'm
there's
sure.
one at the very beginning of the path that's weighs hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and it's just amazing in the winter that water goes right up the path.
Right up
and
the path.
Moves such big pieces of
It does.
wood.
It does. I mean, you just can't underestimate the power of the sea.
Yep.
You can't do it. This has come back quite a bit since the winter. This is essentially where the problem area is. You got the rocks in here, and with that eddy effect, it actually doesn't look as dramatic here now as it does over on the Little Beach side.
Yep.
Because this has come back. But see, the dune fencing makes all the difference in the world, because that's catching that wind-blown sand all the time. As you can see, past generations of fence has actually been buried. I've got spots over in East Beach where we've got 7 layers that are buried.
So this fence is relatively new, is it not?
Brand new.
Brand new.
Less than a month. We went away in April. And I think it was the second week of April they put this in. The same guy did this as did East Beach.
And it goes for half a mile or so up to East Beach, from Big Beach, Central Beach,
all the way to Blue Shutters.
Blue Shutters.
Yeah.
And why is it zigzagged?
Different directions of the wind. Now, if you just had it this way, perpendicular, it would only catch a part of it. Now,
And the idea is basically to build up the dunes,
catch the
through
wind-blown
the wind.
sand. Catch the wind-blown sand. Essentially, we have 2 items in play here. One is the effect of the ocean and the waves that builds the beach in the summertime, low in energy waves depositing the sand, and you can actually see the brown sand right at the water's edge.
Right.
And that's depositing on the beach, which makes the berm. And once that dries out, then you get this fine sand that's going to blow into the parking lot or what have you. So the fence holds that in place, and it builds up. So it builds up over time. We start to get a healthy dune. And then once it's stabilized, we've gone from the grassy areas here to more shrubs. And everything that's growing in there is essentially adapted to this harsh environment. Salt, dry, and wind.
And the hope is we don't have as big a waves and as high a surf next winter, because it seems like this is inland a couple of rows from the old.
It had to. We've lost that much. We've lost that much territory. I actually think we're almost a little optimistic, but I said right at the toe of slope, and the inboard ones are at the toe of slope, and the outboard ones are sticking out a little bit further. Of course, what's so important here is not only does the grass catch the wind-blown sand, but these are what they call rhizome roots, and it makes a network that holds the dune in place. And you're going to hear me say this over and over again, but this is why it's so important. And there's flexibility in the dune grass, so it will come back, as it has. In some cases, probably grown up from being buried almost a foot, but it's come back. Now, when you get into the more stabilized areas, you get the shrubs.
The beach roses.
The beach roses and so forth. And that, again, the root systems are such that it holds the wind-blown sand.
Well, now we're at the westerly part of Central Beach, and before we go to West Beach, Art, this is all rock.
This is the Quonochontaug headlands.
What does that mean?
Well, basically, it's when the glaciers retreated, there were a few strips that were left behind, and certainly the Quonochontaug headlands was one of those spots. Similar spot in Weekapaug, similar spot down at Charlestown Beach. So these are all the promontories that stuck out when everything else went up to Burlingame. But as you can see, between the rocks that are in here, there's just no ability to build sand. The wind carries it away, the water, the current from the water and everything just does not allow for the sand to be deposited. And of course, all of these storms, and the things that makes this year as bad as it was, is a hurricane would come through here a matter of hours and leave. But these winter storms we had this year were easterly, nor'easterly storms that just pounded the coastline for weeks on end. And that's why you have the damage. It's just a repeated effect. And you can really see over by the Nuns Beach how that is starting to build some sand, but it's still cut because of the rocks.
But certainly for most of my life, this was all walkable, and this was all sand, and you could walk right over it.
Yep.
And the hope is that it will come back.
It may, hopefully it will. But this is as bad as I've seen it. So look at the crepidula. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
You know, we had a bunch of that on East Beach.
What?
In
Crepidula? These things?
Yeah.
Do you know what they're called in Latin?
Crepidula fornicata.
That's right.
40
very
years in
fitting.
marine science, I ought to know something. In fact, I had a friend in Block Island who was trying to find a way to serve them. Cook them up and put them in a sauce or something.
We tried it. It's hard to get the sand out.
Yeah.
Hard to get the sand out. This is a new snow fence this spring because the old snow fence is way down here in line with that.
Yep.
And this was vegetation.
Yep.
And this is the kind of thing which on Bob's video, you can see this line where the shoreline is hardened, the cement wall, the rock face, where this doesn't have a hardened edge. The ocean comes in and wants to go that way.
And the reason why it's doing this is because the energy of the ocean is causing an eddy.
It wants to go somewhere.
It wants to go somewhere. Now, if you go down to Mesquamaket, there's the Pleasant View House, and they have a hardened surface. And what used to be the Andrea had a hardened surface. Mm-hmm. And the Mesquamaket Fire District owns the beach.
Yeah.
They can't keep a beach because every time there's a storm, that energy happens and it really knocks it out. And so this is typically of what would happen. Now you're smart to get the fence in early.
Well, I didn't do it. This belongs to Atwood.
Oh, Atwood did it.
And his helpers put it in.
Yep.
But it used to be about here.
Yep. Well,
There's a piece of it.
yep. That's it's the best he can do right now, and that sand will build up in back of it. And what's really nice is with the beach grasses, the root systems, as you can see, they'll practically grow in anything.
Yep.
And those roots will find their way and fill in with the vegetation, which again will build the the berm up a bit.
Yeah.
But
Well, you can see there's a little dune there,
Yep.
and it wants to go right along here.
Yep. Yep.
And
Well, it's the problems. It's with the rock walls. I mean, the solution to erosion back when was build rock walls. But what they don't realize is you don't get a sandy beach if you have a rock wall.
yeah. Well, after Sandy, there was sand all over Musquamacut Road, I think.
A lot of it goes right over and washes in. I mean, that's in a geological situation. The whole Barrier Beach system is migrating north. Now, Peter August, who's a good friend of mine, is when in his retirement took over the Watch Hill Conservancy, and they have measured that the Napatree Point has actually migrated its entire width to the north since the 38 hurricane.
Yep.
That's what it wants to do here. But we have infrastructure and everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not going to let it happen.
Until the
that's-
big one.
A big one. Well, I tell you, after a few days this winter, I thought we were getting the big one.
Yeah. It is getting worse, isn't it?
It is.
Or
It is.
more.
Well, I was at a meeting yesterday. We're trying to fix Charleston Breachway. Charleston Breachway breached on the west side of the wall. It's the wall, the breachway channel and the wall. On the west side, broke through. Destroyed
Really?
the dune and it broke through.
On of the breakwater.
Yep. So we're trying to get it fixed.
Okay.
And Steve McCandless, who's a geologist, has actually measured that they've lost 138 feet, horizontal feet of the beach. I have been saying we've probably lost 75 to 100 feet in my lifetime in the East Beach system.
Just getting smaller.
These are the casualties.
Yep. Now talk about the energy that gets caught here.
Yep.
This rock used to be, last year was up here.
Peter, I've seen the stone walls on Surfside collapse,
Yeah.
and they were able to rebuild it just because it was there,
Yeah.
not because it was a good thing to do.
Well, that's
And-
what's
and
going to happen here.
It's washing out.
Yeah.
This is happening
Yep.
behind the rocks,
Yeah.
and those rocks are going to fall
It's
eventually.
going to get undermined.
Absolutely.
Same thing is happening down further. I think.
Absolutely.
You can see
Yep.
down there.
Yep.
There's a
Yep.
sort of a, what did you call it? A moraine that gets left behind by the glacier. See it sticking out, that
Yeah.
pile of rocks?
Yeah.
Hunk of
That whole Ashaway colony is built on a rock.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can see how this guy's stairs are, how much sand he's lost there.
Oh, yeah.
Now that whole row of Surfside was looking like that before I left in April. And it's built up.
And
You
what
know.
happened then? Oh, you mean it was sloped?
It was just like this. The stairways, it was stairway to nowhere.
Oh,
But
yes.
that sand has built up since
Oh.
April 1st over there. Certainly not here.
Oh, the sand last fall was all the way, you couldn't see all that struts. I mean, you didn't
Yep.
have to fly off the end of
Yep.
the
Well.
stairwell.
That's how much sand we've lost.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, some of that will probably come back, won't it? Won't it?
Yeah, it certainly, this has not come back like over at Central Beach.
Really?
Yeah, Central Beach, I was pleased to see what came up at Central
Is that
Beach.
because of the snow fence?
Not really, because it's got rock revetments in front of
Okay.
it. It's just
Yeah.
the sand came up better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to go down and see the next big erosion?
No, I think this is good right here.
Because you can see, well, from here,
Yep.
Art, you can see a line on that cement stone wall.
Yep. Yep.
that's where the sand and the beach was. You see what I'm talking about?
I do.
It's black above.
Yep.
And then it's white below.
Yep.
That
That's-
front yard has got the same thing as this front yard,
Yep.
only it's worse. It's
Yep.
digging right in.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
They've lost their front yard.
They have.